Chapter 2, Lesson 2, Early Exploration, The Search for New Trade Routes. In 1492, Christopher Columbus led 90 sailors and 3 ships on a voyage into the unknown. As the voyage dragged on, the sailors grew angry. Columbus wrote, "I am told that if I persist in going onward, the best course of action will be to throw me into the sea some night." Before that could happen, a lookout from the ship the Pinta made the signal that he had spotted land. On October 12, 1492, Columbus left his ship, the Santa Maria, and went ashore. Columbus believed he had arrived in the Indies, islands located southeast of China. Actually, he had reached North America. How did Columbus get it so wrong? The maps that he and other European explorers used at the time did not include the Americas because no one in Europe knew they existed. All maps showed 3 continents, Europe, Asia, and Africa, merged into a huge landmass and bordered by oceans. Some explorers thought that the western, Atlantic, and eastern, Pacific oceans ran together to form what they called the Ocean Sea. No one realized the true size of the oceans or the existence of other continents. Columbus was sailing on behalf of Spain, but Portugal was the first European power to explore the boundaries of the known world by sea. Unlike Spain, Portugal did not have a port on the Mediterranean Sea. This meant the Portuguese could not use the existing trade routes between Asia and Europe. Portugal's rulers wanted to find a new route to China and India. The Portuguese also knew about the great riches in the West African kingdoms. These riches were carried by caravan across the desert to North Africa, and then by ship across the Mediterranean. Portuguese traders needed a better route so that they too could get Western African gold and other riches. The beginning of Portuguese exploration. Portugal's Prince Henry laid the groundwork for the era of exploration. In about 1420, he set up a center for exploration at Sagres, on the southwestern tip of Portugal, where endeth land and where beginneth sea. Known as Henry the Navigator, the prince never intended to become an explorer himself. Instead, he planned the voyages and then analyzed the reports that his crews brought home. At Sagres, Prince Henry set up a school of navigation. There, astronomers, geographers, and mathematicians came to share their knowledge with the Portuguese sailors, shipbuilders, and mapmakers. As each successful voyage brought back new information, Henry's expert mapmakers updated the charts. Portuguese ships sailed south along the coast of West Africa. As they went south, they traded for gold and ivory and set up trading posts in the region. Because of its abundance of gold, Africa's west coast came to be known as the Gold Coast. In the mid-1400s, Portuguese traders began to buy enslaved Africans there as well. King John II of Portugal launched new efforts to create a Portuguese trading empire in Asia. All the Portuguese had to do was find a sea route around Africa. If they succeeded, they would be able to trade directly with India and China. They could bypass the North African and Asian caravans and Mediterranean merchants. With that goal in mind, in the 1480s, King John urged the Portuguese sea captains to explore farther south along the African coast. Bartolomeu Dias. In 1487, Bartolomeu Dias set out from Lisbon with 2 small caravels and a supply ship. King John had sent Dias to explore the southernmost part of Africa. From there, Dias was to sail northeast into the Indian Ocean. This expedition included some of Portugal's best pilots. They sailed for days, staying close to the coast of Africa. After passing the mouth of the Orange River in South Africa, the expedition met with a fierce storm that carried it southward, of course, and out of sight of land. When the winds finally died down, Dias steered east and then north until he found land again. Excitedly, Dias realized that he had already sailed past the southernmost part of Africa. On the way, he had passed a landform called a cape, a piece of land that juts into the water. Dias set a course back to Portugal. On the return journey, after passing that piece of land again, he wrote that he had been around the Cape of Storms. King John renamed it the Cape of Good Hope. The king hoped that the passage around Africa might provide a new route to India. Vasco da Gama. Portugal's voyages to India began years later. In July 1497, after much preparation, Vasco da Gama set sail from Portugal with 4 ships headed for Africa. Da Gama's ships did not hug the African coast, as Diaz's ships had. Instead, they sailed in a wide arc south and west of Africa. They were out of sight of land for more than 3 months. The purpose of this detour was to reach ocean currents that would help the sailors travel safely around the Cape of Good Hope. After rounding the Cape on November 22nd, da Gama was on Africa's eastern coast. He made many stops, including one at the Mombasa, part of present-day Kenya. There he met a pilot from India, who guided him the rest of the way. Da Gama reached the port of Calicut in India in May 1498. Portugal's long-held dream of a sea route to Asia was now a reality. Portugal's trading empire. Events moved quickly. Within 6 months of da Gama's return to Portugal, 13 ships set sail out of Lisbon and headed for India. The ships were commanded by a nobleman, Pedro Alvarez Cabral. Cabral planned to follow da Gama's westward then southward course. Instead, he went so far west that he reached Brazil. Cabral claimed Brazil for his king and sent one of the ships back to Portugal with the good news that Portugal now had a foothold in the Americas. Cabral then continued to India and returned with spices, porcelain, and other valuable cargo. Other Portuguese fleets soon made the journey to India, where Portugal set up permanent forts. Portuguese fleets began to make yearly voyages to India. Their cargoes made the Portuguese capital of Lisbon the marketplace of Europe. Columbus crosses the Atlantic. Born in Genoa, Italy, in 1451, Christopher Columbus became a sailor for Portugal. He traveled as far north as the Arctic Circle and as far south as Africa's Gold Coast. To reach Asia, Christopher Columbus had a different route in mind than the one he used by his Portuguese comrades. He planned to sail west. In the 1400s, most educated people believed that the world was round. People were less certain about the Earth's size. Columbus was among those who based their estimates on the works of Ptolemy, an ancient Greek astronomer. Columbus believed Asia was about 2,760 miles, 4,441 kilometers, from Portugal, a voyage of about 2 months by ship. However, Ptolemy had underestimated Earth's size, and by using Ptolemy's estimate, Columbus did too. Vikings in North America. Several centuries before the voyages of da Gama, Cabral, and Columbus, northern Europeans had sailed to North America. Known as Vikings, or Norsemen, they sailed ships from present-day Scandinavia to Iceland and Greenland in the 800s and 900s and established settlements there for a brief period of time. According to Norse sagas or traditional stories, a Viking sailor named Leif Erikson explored lands west of Greenland in about the year 1000. The sagas refer to this land as Vinland. Ruins from around that period exist in northeastern Canada, which could support the sagas. The Vikings' voyages were not well known throughout Europe, however. Other Europeans did not discover the Americas until Columbus made his historic voyage. Columbus and Queen Isabella. Columbus had a plan for reaching Asia, but he still needed money to finance his expedition. He visited European monarchs looking for support. Finally, he found a sponsor in Spain. For most of the 1400s, Spanish monarchs devoted or committed their energy to driving the Muslims out of Spain. Muslims had invaded Spain in the 700s, but their power had been declining for centuries. The last Muslim kingdom in Spain fell in 1492. This freed Spain's monarchs to focus on other goals. The Spanish observed the seafaring and trading successes of neighboring Portugal with envy. They too wanted the riches of Asian trade. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain agreed to support Columbus's expedition for 2 reasons. One reason was that Columbus promised to bring Christianity to any lands he found. As a devout Catholic, this was important to Isabella. Another reason was that if he succeeded in finding a route to Asia, Spain would become wealthy from trade with that region. Queen Isabella promised Columbus a share of any riches gained from lands he discovered on his way to Asia. Columbus's first voyage. On August 3, 1492, Columbus set sail from Palos, Spain. He had 2 small ships, the Niña and the Pinta, and a larger one, the Santa Maria. Columbus was captain of the Santa Maria, his lead ship or flagship. The 3 ships carried about 90 sailors and a 6-month supply of food and water. The small fleet stopped at the Canary Islands off the coast of West Africa for repairs and supplies. Columbus then began the difficult voyage westward across unknown and mysterious stretches of the Atlantic Ocean. After a few weeks at sea, the sailors grew nervous about the distance they had traveled, but Columbus refused to alter his course. Instead, he encouraged the crew by describing the riches he believed they would find. He urged them on, saying that with the help of our Lord, they would arrive in the Indies. On October 12, 1492, at 2 o'clock in the morning, a lookout shouted, "Tierra, tierra!" Land, land. He had spotted a small island in the chain now called the Bahamas. Columbus went ashore, claimed the island for Spain, and named it San Salvador. Although he did not know it, Columbus had reached the Americas. Columbus believed he had arrived in the East Indies, the islands off the coast of Asia. This is why today we call the Caribbean islands the West Indies. It also explains why Columbus called the local people Indians. He noted that the natives regarded the Europeans with wonder and often touched the crew members to find out if they were flesh and bones like themselves. When Columbus returned to Spain, Queen Isabella and the Spanish King Ferdinand received him with great honor. They made him an admiral of the ocean sea and agreed to provide funds for his future voyages. Columbus's achievements. Columbus made 3 more voyages for Spain in 1493, 1498, and 1502. He explored the Caribbean islands of Hispaniola, present-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Jamaica. He also sailed along the coast of Central America and northern South America. He claimed these lands for Spain and started settlements. He also mapped the coastline of Central America. Columbus had not reached Asia, but instead had found a part of the world that was unknown to Europeans, Asians, and Africans. In the years that followed, the Spanish went on to explore most of the Caribbean and to establish the Spanish Empire in the Americas, dividing the Americas. Both Spain and Portugal wanted to protect their claims in the Americas. They turned to Pope Alexander VI for help. In 1493, he ordered a line of demarcation, an imaginary line that reached from the North Pole to the South Pole and cut through the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Spain was to control all lands west of the line, and Portugal would control all lands east of the line. Portugal objected, saying that the division gave more land to Spain. In 1494, the 2 countries signed an agreement called the Treaty of Tordesillas, which moved the line farther west. The 2 countries had divided the entire unexplored world between themselves. Further explorations. After Columbus, other voyagers explored the Americas. In 1499, Italian Amerigo Vespucci led a voyage funded by Spain. On this and a later journey for Portugal, he explored the coast of South America. Vespucci realized South America was a separate continent and not part of Asia. European geographers began to call the continent America in his honor. A Spaniard, Vasco Núñez de Balboa, heard stories of the great waters beyond the mountains of Panama in Central America. He hiked through steamy rainforests to find them. At the coast in 1513, Balboa saw a vast body of water, which he claimed for Spain. Along with the adjoining lands, Balboa was the first European to see the Pacific Ocean from the Americas. Sailing around the world. In 1520, Ferdinand Magellan, a Portuguese explorer who was sailing for Spain, reached the southernmost tip of South America. He sailed through the stormy waters of a narrow sea passage, or strait. The strait led him into a calm ocean, the same one Balboa had seen. The waters were so peaceful, Pacifico in Spanish, that Magellan named the ocean the Pacific Ocean. Magellan died in the Philippine Islands, but his crew continued to sail westward, arriving back in Spain in 1522. Magellan's crew were the first people known to circumnavigate or sail around the world.